Right, I am back with a new Outriders video. Not necessarily that there's anything new to talk about per se, but we are heading into 2022 here, and Square Enix just kind of laid out a blog post that talks about its upcoming content plans for the year, and the Outriders Worldslayer expansion was on that list. Notably, there was no Avengers content on that list at all, and nothing was listed. I wrote an article saying that I don't think that necessarily means that like nothing is coming or they've canceled, 2022 Avengers content, but maybe there's just nothing to announce yet. And yet, I made one of these videos about kind of guessing at what happens with Avengers 2022 content, and I figured I'd make a similar one with Outriders, except that seems a lot more clear-cut in terms of what we are expecting from Outriders, because yet again, they are pretty much just copying Diablo, which is a good thing because Diablo is sort of the, baseline market leader for all games of this genre. It was kind of the original looter shooter before there were actually shooters. It was just kind of how you did an ARPG in terms of kind of balancing and structuring the story campaign and endgame and, of course, expansions. We know that Outriders is getting a dedicated kind of full-on, almost certainly paid expansion. And this is part of the whole Outriders, like, we're not a live service game that they have, been claiming forever. It has been patched and balanced like a live service game with a lot of nerfs and buffs, and most recently they had the New Horizons edition, which was not like a seasonal thing, but they just sort of like finished the base game. They like fleshed out a lot of stuff they didn't really have time to do. They added new features like transmog, they added a couple more expeditions, but nothing terribly substantial in terms of story. So I wanted to go back to what they were talking about even before launch, because I asked them in an interview a long time ago, like kind of what their plans were for expansions and things like that. And they have clearly had this idea in mind for a long while now. This is from creative director Bartek Kmita. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing that right. We never said we would abandon the game. This isn't a games as service, but if people like it, we will definitely be doing more things in the Outriders universe. We have so many stories to tell and a lot of ideas we want to explore that we couldn't fit in the original game, so we're happy to create more content in the future. Anything we would make would be in the form of significant expansions with self-contained stories. So, that is what we're getting with Worldslayer, and it appears, all we have so far is a very small teaser with a woman who seems to be the new villain. She seems to be one of an altered person that we're fighting. And then I think they glimpse like a couple new enemies, and there's a lot of skulls flying around and things, but we don't actually know what the plot here is. The end of the game, spoilers I guess, is just that we call down all these drop pods from the ship, and then we're going to collect them as part of the end game. But this is still a very dangerous planet with a lot of things to conquer. So even if the main kind of storyline of finding the ship and all that and discovering kind of the true history of the planet is done, there's, it's sci-fi. You can introduce a lot of new things and a lot of new threats. What I'm expecting from this is pretty much what we see from a Diablo type expansion. So that is substantive content. I am assuming this will be kind of an entirely new storyline. I don't know if this will be standalone, as in like you can play it without the base game of Outriders. Obviously, Outriders is still on Xbox Game Pass and stuff, so that might make things easier for some people. But I'm expecting a fully new storyline. I am expecting new zones. We have not gotten any new zones since launch. We got new expeditions, which are just sort of building areas off of old zones, but we have not expanded the map in really any meaningful way past the story campaign. But I would expect some sort of kind of like new biome, similarly structured to how we saw things already. I'm not expecting Outriders to go, open world all of a sudden or anything like that. So I would think that the zones would kind of be formatted similar to what we've seen already, where they're pretty linear and, a little maze-like, but they're not really kind of open world explorable in the traditional sense, like full of tons of secrets and things. It's kind of a means to an end in terms of getting through different story checkpoints. And I will assume there would be a main storyline and maybe some submissions like we saw with the base game. One thing I am expecting that is very much a Diablo thing is a new class. I don't have the exact quote, but they did mention a long time ago potential things like new classes coming to the game, and we have 4 classes with 3 kind of skill trees right now, and I suppose you could do the whole Destiny thing where you just add like a fourth skill tree or something for each class. But to me, this kind of, I would imagine that we're going to have a fifth class introduced here. That would be a way, a reason for people to pick up the expansion to kind of start that class from nothing, and maybe you can just level it over the course of the expansion, or you can turn up the difficulty and go through the expansion with one of your existing characters. I would not be super thrilled if they introduce a new class and then you had to do the entire base story campaign again in that full leveling and gearing process. That would be a little annoying, I would say. But we'll see how they kind of handle that. I do not have any kind of ideas offhand about what this class would be. I saw people talking about like a gravity-based class or something like that, but we have like kind of poison and free stuff with Technomancer. We have fire, obviously, with Pyromancer. We have time slow stuff with Trickster, and then we have Earth bleed kind of stuff with Devastator. To me, that leaves maybe like a lightning-based class, or I could see a gravity-based class, something like that. There are kind of some lightning skills in the game already, and lightning is a type of damage that you find in weapons and things, so that to me seems like you could have some sort of class in that regard. I don't know if this would be like DPS or tank, or how they would heal. Whether we already have two kind of close heals. We have Devastator and Trickster, where you get life healing on killing things close to you, and then we have Technomancer, which is heal on damage, and then Pyromancer is heal on marked enemies. Eventually, all that kind of goes out the window because you're sort of just healing from skill leech and weapon leech. So I don't know if that's more relevant kind of at the beginning of the game before you're like fully geared up. But I would very much love for there to be an entirely new class, entirely new gear sets for them, and obviously kind of bigger things like new weapons. One thing I was disappointed with the New Horizons update was that there was pretty much no new loot. There were some weapon transmog skins, essentially, was the only kind of new loot introduced, but it was mostly just a big balance patch and then some new expeditions. So I would love for there to be another type of endgame activity introduced here besides just expeditions. I'm not even asking for anything that's like a Destiny raid or something. I don't even think I want anything that mechanically complex. Like, I think we've already seen with Avengers that like even if you do that correctly, like if you don't have like kind of the right level of player base, that might not even be the best thing for your game. I think they've already made good changes to expeditions in terms of getting rid of the timer and things like that. I would just like for some kind of different activity that isn't necessarily just that exact same thing in like 4 or 5 new expeditions or whatever comes with this. So this seems to me kind of just a lot easier to predict in terms of what kinds of things we're going to see from this. Outriders has used Diablo as a model for literally everything. I mean, almost everything about Outriders is something you would find in Diablo 3 especially. And I would not think that would be much different when we see an expansion from them, similar to Reaper of Souls, which was new zones, new big enemy, and then introducing a new class at the same time. That was Paladin? I don't remember. Or no, did they even call it Paladin? It was something like a Paladin. It was Crusader. I think that was it. I think it was Crusader. Sorry, it's been a long time. So I do kind of expect that. And if it didn't have a new class, I would admittedly be a little disappointed with that. I think rolling through an expansion with just my super geared out, 4 classes already would be a little lackluster. So I really am hoping for a new class. Again, this is very different than Avengers, where Avengers is kind of like all over the place. Like, oh, are they going to do a mirror character? Are they going to do like She-Hulk? Are they going to do another expansion? And like everything seems sort of up in the air with no release dates and no kind of really fixed plan here. Whereas Outriders is like, we're doing a big expansion, like the end. And the only thing we don't know is when that is coming. Since there's not even a window announced yet, I would say not until probably at least summer, like at the earliest late spring, but I would say summer, maybe even slipping to fall. I do expect this to be pretty substantive, so I know it's something they've been working on for probably since the game launch, honestly. After this, I wouldn't really expect anything after this, honestly. I don't know what's kind of going on internally with Square Enix and People Can Fly. I think Outriders was enough of a success to greenlight something like a large paid expansion. There's been some conflict back and forth about Square Enix didn't tell Outriders how much their sales were, and they got paid less than they thought, and so they kind of blamed Game Pass for some of that because those weren't like actual game sales. So there's there's always some drama with like Square Enix and its Western developers, but overall, I think Outriders was a successful kind of experiment for them. Whether that means they are greenlighting Outriders 2 or something like that is another story and a conversation for another day. I definitely don't think that's guaranteed. It seems like people can fly, could be working on just a new project going forward, and could do something else. I think if they just did Outriders and then an expansion and moved on to a new project, that would be fine. I certainly would welcome Outriders 2. I think there's a lot of things they can kind of build on with this concept in this universe, which I found this universe surprisingly engaging, and I genuinely ended up liking a lot of these characters, which is not what I was expecting from the trailers and stuff. And I maintain that I really like the main storyline and our kind of base hero in this story in terms of their, I would say, lackadaisical attitude toward being this like super-powered superhero type world conquering person. I don't know. It worked for me. So I would like to see more from this universe. And if it's just in the expansion, that's great. If it's in a sequel, even better. But we need to see how the expansion performs first, and then maybe we'll have more conversations. So anyway, that is my kind of expectations for Outriders this year. Just this main expansion, and we will see kind of how broad it is. But I think we can probably look to Diablo 3 is an example for the type of thing we could expect from here. So anyway, thanks for watching. I don't know if there's any more loot shooters to kind of guess about for the coming year. I'm going to have a lot of stuff on Lost Ark. If we're talking about Diablo, Lost Ark is essentially going to be the Diablo replacement for the next few years here, because Diablo 4 is not going to be done anytime remotely soon between all the Activision Blizzard drama and now the sale to Microsoft, and like I'm not expecting to see that until like, I don't know, 2024, 2025 at the earliest. So Lost Ark is this giant Korean MMORPG, ARPG that is it's like Diablo on steroids. I'm playing it right now. I can't really talk about it super much, but there was a big open beta, and a lot of people got pretty deep into it there. So what I'm playing is not meaningfully different than that. So it's kind of weird, but I'm not going to talk about it till the actual embargo in like a week or two here. So that will be a whole other topic, and I'm planning to talk about that a good amount too. That's kind of a different genre because that's not a looter shooter. That is more in the Diablo vein of literal, top-down ARPG style. So, but it's something I think that will be engaging for a lot of people. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I will talk to you guys soon. Take care.